Hello everyone, welcome to Aston University's English How-To series. My name is Dr. Chloe Harrison. In today's short video I'm going to talk you through some general do's and don'ts and general guidance surrounding setting up your own survey or questionnaire, which you might be required to do as part of one of your modules here at Aston. So let's start then with thinking about the advantages of carrying out a questionnaire. So why might you want to set up a survey or questionnaire, and what benefits does it offer the researcher? So to start with, it allows the researcher to cover particular aspects of a topic. So because you're designing a particular study, you can focus your questions around your research aims and your own research questions. And that can be very helpful and allow you to have a more focused data set. It's also a good method for accessing both qualitative and quantitative data. So you might be asking lots of open questions to your participants, in which case you'll be generating lots of qualitative data. On the other hand, you could also include some numerical scale questions, and therefore you could easily generate some quantitative data as well. Designing a study or questionnaire then also means that your methodology is pretty rigorous. Every participant will be responding to the same question or same set of questions, and therefore the data that is produced becomes more objective, more reliable, and actually generally more scientific as well. Another advantage then is that the results can be easily compared and validated by other researchers. So because you've created this questionnaire or survey, your methodology is actually very transparent, so that can be helpful for other researchers who are looking at similar kinds of research questions. And actually within your survey or questionnaire as well, you can kind of compare questions against each other and answers against each other very easily too. It's also very practical and time efficient, so whilst you should spend quite a bit of time setting up your questionnaire and survey, and I think that is where that is the most labour-intensive bit of this. Once you set up your questions, you can carry out a survey or questionnaire online, so it just involves sending a link round to people, and through that it's possible to generate larger data sets pretty quickly and efficiently. And in turn, having a bigger data set helps you to validate more generalisable conclusions as well. So the bigger the data set, the better usually in terms of validating those general conclusions you're drawing from your data set. Okay, so let's move on to ethics approval then. So I have done a short video about how to apply for ethics approval and when you might need to apply for ethics approval as part of the How-To series, so do have a look at that if you're unsure about this process, but I'll just mention some of the kind of central points here again as well. So if you're carrying out a study that involves primary data collection from human participants, you will need to receive ethics approval for your study before you begin your project. So you shouldn't do it retrospectively, so it needs to be before you have distributed your survey or your questionnaire to your participants. This is very important, and the university regulations are pretty strict on this. If you don't receive ethics approval for a study like this, you may receive a 0 grade for your project. So really important that you receive ethics approval from the outset. And actually, it's also helpful for you because it's the actual kind of process is a little quality check. It ensures that what you're doing is carried out or being carried out appropriately, responsibly, and safely, and that you're following the established methodological protocols effectively as well. So really important that you go through this process early on. And you should speak with your project supervisor or your module tutor about your plans for your study as early as you can, and they will also be the ones who will grant you ethics approval. So it's really important that you speak to them and open up a dialogue about your ideas early on in this process. Okay, moving on to designing your questions then. This is the really important bit. As I mentioned earlier, this is the bit that you should spend a fair bit of time on as well, because a well-designed questionnaire will generate more kind of helpful data and will save you time further down the line when it comes to analysing that data as well. So it's really important that you think very carefully about what you want to ask your participants. So you should make sure that your instructions and the questions are clear, simple and unambiguous. This can sound quite an obvious tip, but is also really important here. So there shouldn't be any kind of confusion amongst your participants about what they're being asked. So do make sure that they're clear and accessible, and that everyone is sure about what you're researching, but what you're actually asking them to respond to as well. You should be careful not to combine questions into one big one. So I have seen questionnaires put together like this in the past, where there's maybe 2 or 3 parts to a question that have been rolled together, and then sometimes what you see in the responses is that a participant will only answer one bit of the question, when in fact the researcher is interested in the other bits as well. So if you have if you look at your question and think actually there's 2 or 3 things going on here, split it up into smaller questions, and have them as sort of separate entries on your questionnaire. And again, that just helps with the clarity of the overall questionnaire design too. You should also avoid loaded questions where an underlying assumption is built in. So a question like, why do people think that the X accent is so unpleasant? Obviously that is kind of giving a particular evaluative stance. So avoid loaded questions, try and keep things as neutral as possible. At the same time, you should also avoid leading questions where the wording suggests that a right answer is preferred. Generally speaking, you should start with easier or shorter questions and then include the longer ones later. By longer ones, I mean the ones that take more time. So if you're asking people to kind of elaborate on something in quite a bit of detail, then include that later on. So have some easier, shorter questions early on, and then the longer ones, the more time-consuming ones, I should say, later. You should also tell your participants that this is what you're doing as well, just so they know what to expect, so there are no unpleasant surprises along the way. So be very clear in your instructions from the beginning that that's how you're going to be structuring the questionnaire or survey. So these guiding principles are taken from Ray and Bloomer's book, Projects in Linguistics, which I would highly recommend if you're feeling like you need a helpful guide that will go into a bit more detail about setting up questionnaires and surveys. So do have a look at that resource if you're interested. Okay, examples of questionnaires in English then. So you can do lots of different things through using questionnaires and surveys in your English degree, and they don't just belong to English language projects either. So I've just given you a couple of examples here from questionnaires and surveys that I have seen recently. But this is not an exhaustive list. There are lots and lots of different things you can do through these studies. So if you're interested in carrying out a survey or questionnaire in English language, you might be exploring, or you can use it to explore attitudes towards particular linguistic choices. So you can look at evaluative attitudes towards the use of swear words or slang, for example, and create a survey around that. You can also gather data about how phrases or structures are used by different groups of people. And again, there are so many other different ideas you can explore in English language through these kinds of approaches. In English literature, you can perhaps think more about readers and think about creating a survey of reading habits. You can also be quite specific with your questionnaire and your survey design, and you can explore reader responses to a specific text or passage. Maybe you're interested in a particular opening to a novel, and you're interested in readers' emotional or evaluative responses to that, and therefore you might want to give them the text to read, and then to give them a post-reading questionnaire afterwards that assesses their responses. So yes, like I said, it's not just something which we associate with English language. We can see in English literature as well, and you can tailor it according to your own specific research aims. Okay, returning back to questionnaire design then. So as well as including questions, you might want to include numerical scales, or what are known as Likert scales, and you'll probably be familiar with this format. So this is where we have a statement that expresses an attitude, and then the participants are asked to indicate how strongly they agree or disagree with that statement. They're helpful because they enable calculations of mean scores, and they are, as we've said, itemised rating scales. They tend to be between sort of 5 and 7 in terms of the actual kind of numbered parts of the scale. So you can see an example of this on the right hand side. This is taken from one of our module evaluation questionnaires. So one of the statements that we give to students is the module content is interesting. So there we have a statement expressing an attitude, and then we'll ask the participants to indicate their level of agreement or disagreement, and then you explain what the itemised scale refers to. So 1, definitely agree, 2, mostly agree. The middle number is usually the neutral one, so neither agree nor disagree, mostly, definitely, and so on. Again, with Likert scales, make sure that you ask one thing at a time, and again, avoid guiding responses by using evaluative language. Okay, some final comments then about setting up your questionnaire. Don't ask too many questions. Try and keep things fairly succinct. Participants are less likely to complete a questionnaire if it's too long, so do keep it fairly short. I think the sort of 10-15 minutes is probably as long as you really kind of want to aim for. Do include some warm-up questions. So maybe you've designed your study so that one question is actually going to be pivotal for your analysis. Don't put that one first if that's the case. Do include some warm-up questions early on, just so that participants get used to the structure and the form or the format of the questionnaire. Do carry out a small pilot if possible. So that just means a test run. So once you've got your questions and you're fairly happy with them, ask a couple of friends or family members to fill out the questionnaire just to troubleshoot any problems early on, and they can check that things are clear and they know what's being asked and so on. And again, speak to your tutor or project supervisor about your ideas as early as possible, and they'll be able to help kind of give you some guidance around your specific research aims too. Okay, that's it from me then. If you do have any further questions, as I mentioned, please do get in touch with your module tutor, or you can contact me, and here's my email address. But otherwise, good luck with all of your surveys and questionnaires.